what I can do, I can buy as little as one bottle of something and launch it into our specialty shops. So even if you have low allocation, and if we deem the product special enough, we can launch it into the specialty stores. That's 9 stores in Norway. So allocation, that just depends on which kind of segment you would like to launch the product in, not just the basic assortment, but also order or the special assortment.
I like the word relevance with this topic. As we are building the selection for consumers, we need to understand what is Finnish consumer looking for. And but also, as I said before, it's very important to have dialogue with producers and suppliers to understand what is possible for our markets, what is available, and you mentioned quite many distilleries in the world. We probably don't have all the information, and that's why we need to continue talking with each other.
Just kind of picking up on that in terms of not just the number of whiskies, but the different styles of whiskies which are emerging. You were saying, Idar, you need a certain number of whiskies to be able to write the tender, etc., etc. Is that not inherently restricting diversity? You're not by running that system, you're not appreciating the sheer diversity of really intriguing whiskies that are getting made today, which don't really conform to a prior idea of what whiskey is.
Of course it does. Of course it does. But the reason why we have this system is there was a big scandal that many probably know about a couple of years ago with corruption. And one of the reasons we have this law is that so nobody can pay me money to make me write a tender for one product. But it makes it really hard to get specific products into the assortment. There are some products from even big producers, they are the only one in the world making this one product. We see that this is going to be the new hit, but I can't do anything with it because it's only one. So it is a huge problem when you're trying to build an assortment, but this is what I have to live with. I can't do anything about it. But I agree with you, yes, it constricts diversity.
Cool. Do you want to?
Well, we have a... I actually didn't talk so much about our purchasing process. It's quite similar. I'm not going to say it's the same. It's similar. We also use flavor profiles in our tenders, and they are discriminatory because we're looking for specific things when we do those tenders. Sweden is a unique whiskey market, as I pointed out. More than 33% of all the malt whiskey we sell is peated. There's no other market in the world where you sell that much peated malt whiskey. The proportion is so big, and a lot of it comes from very specific origins in Scotland. And when we do get peated examples of Swedish whiskies or Japanese whiskies, and they sell out very quickly. There is some experience in this room with having peated whiskey on the Swedish market. It is very attractive. I think the key thing for us as a purchasing department is to actually know what the consumer wants and to be able to facilitate and give that information to you as producers and to the suppliers at Systembolaget so they can use that to make our assortment even better. And that's where like presenting our assortments becomes key, like I did in the end of the presentation. These assortments are to be used as different sales channels, viewed completely. I know it's within the same retailer that you're selling, but these are different assortments, key to different consumers. And I would say with the different styles of whiskey, we can accommodate quite a few of them. In our ordering assortment alone, I think I looked last year, we had 1,400 products, whiskey products. 600 and 700 malt whiskies. I mean, a lot of those are independent bottlings, and they're in very small volumes. So I can't pick all of them up for our exclusive assortment. And they're heavily allocated, restricted. They sell through, and there is a market for that too. So that's a valid assortment and there's so much choice. And we only have our suppliers and producers to thank for that large assortment and the interests of the Swedish consumers. And we need to facilitate that, and that's what we're trying to do.
I mean, would you say that also that is the system almost inevitably skewed towards the larger producers? That, you know, there isn't really a level playing field. I mean, you've got a lot of smaller producers here.
I would say that it's absolutely a level playing field because we have the ban on commercial. So let's look at wine, because the reason I'm saying now that we have the first single malt whiskey in our basic assortment from November is not because we don't want the single malt, it's because it's the first one that actually have enough volume to be in our basic assortment. That's why. And of course it's a great whiskey. But we have some producers of wine that are very small, and they exclusively deliver to our market because they have a basic listing that works. And in an environment where you can commercially buy, like I was in France, and on every bus stop there was a big poster of monkey shoulder on every bus stop. If you allow that, then it's not an even playing field anymore. As long as you have the right distributor that will work, the on-trade that will work with the journalists, that will work with us, you have the same playing field as the big ones. So I think our market actually is a level playing field, as long as you have the volume to fight up to the big ones.
I just want to second one of those things that is very important to understand. The restrictions on marketing is the big thing. It's not the way we sell alcohol, it's the restriction. And they're there for a reason. And that is for the health of the people. And those restrictions are more leveling than the sales, the way we sell alcohol. So even if you're a large distributor of alcohol globally, you will find it difficult to actually use your strength in a market like Sweden, I'm guessing Norway and Finland too, because of those marketing restrictions and the activities. And I think that just becomes more of a truth for every year I spend in this job. So.
Martin, do you want to?
Yeah. Alko has general selection and seasonal selection and so-called bigger specialty selection as a planned selection. Then we have order selection that importers can put their products there quite freely, and smaller specialities, and even we can buy from 1 bottle to 200 bottles, smaller amounts if needed. As said, even in Finland, marketing spirits is basically forbidden. So in that sense, it's maybe a little bit difficult to get consumer awareness, even if there would be availability.
One more thing. Regarding the strength of certain companies that have been around for ages, I think something that actually levels the playing field is where we're going with sustainability, because that puts the same pressure on everybody to actually reach for that. And the flexibility, if you're that large as a supplier or producer, becomes more of a challenge than if you are smaller and you have more agility on the market or in your business relationships. So maybe you can't strong arm your suppliers in the same way that a Diageo or a Pernod Ricard could do, but you're still very important to them. And if you are many of you, then it becomes a question of this has to happen, because we have more of our producers requiring certified raw materials.
I'm going to throw it up. Yeah, throw it up. Throw it open. Yeah. Can you wait for the wonderful mic to come round? The reason we're passing the microphone is because we're recording. And
I'll just hold it for me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Jakob from Thy Distillery in Denmark.
So it's two questions, but I think it's one. So I'll put them both to you. Yeah. So the first question, first part of the question is maybe David, but also Ida and Marta. Do you see, or where do you see that Nordic whiskies have to go or do to be relevant for an even bigger part of the market? So is you said like in Sweden there's some Swedish whiskies a lot. You were the first to produce in the Nordics as well, but more distilleries are coming and offering something. So do you see there's a chance for larger sale of Danish whiskey, Norwegian whiskey, and so on in your respective countries, or Finnish whiskey, or whatever it is? And what do we need to supply to be as relevant as possible in your market? And then picking up on your question, because that would be one of my key points about relevance. Like you state, sustainability is really a key target, like maybe even the first and foremost target of what you're looking at. So would you say, like, would you do tenders that are specifically asking for the more sustainable products? And maybe would you put up different targets for, you know, how much does it sell per year to keep it in your assortment, because you really want to highlight the sustainable? I mean, how far would you go in that direction, working with that in your tenders? And I think it makes sense because as small producers, we have an advantage as well, that it's easier maybe for us to sort or source local grains or grow them ourselves, or whatever the chances we have, than Diageo would do it for all the distilleries. So maybe we actually have a good chance of being very traceable and sustainable in what we're doing. So that might be a part of what we can deliver. So your thoughts on that?
That's a great question.
First of all, I can say that I cannot say on what we're going to do anything do in the future, but because I'm not allowed to talk about our future tendering process. But what I can say, no, but I'm not. We have something called likebehandlingsprosessen. We have to treat everybody the same. So if I tell him something, I have to tell the whole world at the same time. So I'm not allowed to tell one. Yeah. But then everybody here in the room get to know it before him. So that's the way it is. But we have goals and we have standards set for us by the government and what the consumer expects from us when it comes to sustainability, and we have to deliver on those things. So that's the only thing I can say about further tender plans. On the other hand, I think in Norway that we are just starting to grow as a whiskey market. People are getting more and more interested in whiskey. We are seeing some trends that I don't like particularly well, where you have to have a new whiskey every time, a little bit that the way it has been with beers. But that's not a huge thing. But the general consumer of whiskey in Norway is looking for two things. It's age and price. And I know that most of you here cannot deliver on that price and that age. And I know in a while, in some years, you will probably be able to do that. But I'm just talking on behalf of the consumer now that I know what is selling. And they are asking again and again, why isn't there an age statement on the bottle? I don't think the younger consumer cares about the age statement. But the traditional, a little bit older consumer, they would like to have an age on the bottle to know how old it is, because they believe firmly that age and value is two things that goes together. I don't agree with that, but I know that a lot of our consumers believe that. So it's very hard for me to say that what can you do to sell more? Drop your price to put the age on your label. I don't want to say that because you are doing something different. But that's the eye of the consumer.
Yeah, I think. I mean, there are some producers in this room who are. They were novel producers in their own country to actually be in our own assortment and in our fixed assortment. And I've seen their journey, and I know that it's not been a straight. None of them have had a straight road. The products have been tweaked and they've been made over and done to actually suit not just the commercial aspects, but also the situation. How much whiskey do they have? Can they sell it at this price? And so I think the key word is being stable, finding the sort of, having the levels of stability that you can supply, and how frequently, doing it frequently and in the right way, but being stable as a producer and knowing, okay, we are now ready for the market to be able to supply. And I firmly believe that running your home market is key. So start off by building your home market, your own back garden, backyard, if you will. When it comes to sort of age statements, and I believe my role is to convey to you the commercial qualities that products need to survive on the Swedish market. I'm to dress the offerings that we serve to the consumers with the right qualities. And I give them to you freely from the insight that we get from all our sales and from meeting large producers and the developments they do, the festivals, or like if we go to any exhibitions around the world, or any meetings we have, I try to summarize them into ideas that we can actually transform. And it's quite easy. You can translate what's being done for Scotch whiskey or Scottish single malt over to Swedish malt, or to Danish malt, or to Norwegian malt whiskey, or Finnish malt whiskey. We don't need age statements, but we need commercial qualities that are very transparent for the consumer, so they understand why they're paying the price. I know something about the Swedish consumer, which, if we look at that peated amount of proportion of malt whiskey we sell, there's a key that I see in the other categories, that Swedish consumers like flavoursome products. They like flavour. They're big on flavour. They love getting a lot of flavour for your buck. And so I like introducing offerings for the market which have a lot of flavour, because I know that gives the product a possibility to survive in a commercial environment. A fact is that we don't own the price point after a certain amount of months when the product's been. You own that as a supplier to Systembolaget, and I'm usually used as somebody to discuss. Do you think this would be a bad thing to up or down the price on this? And I can only give advice, and it's not something you can use against me later, but I can always advise. And I always will. The advice is free, and my door is always open for these questions. And we do know, we've done this a long time. We're in it for the long term. And I was saying that on the break here. One of the things that's good with our sales formats is we're in it for the long term. Whiskey is long term. It's not short route to market. It's a long term business. So actually, it would be quite it suits our way of selling alcohol. We are here for the long run.
Just a comment about the whole market. In Norway, we are a young country for whiskey, as I said. We have now several whiskey distilleries, not that many whiskies that are ready yet, and most of them are one-offs and single barrels and small batches. So far, these things have sold well, and then of course it's important that these whiskies have a good quality so that they will keep on selling and keep on buying the next one. And it's terrific if you concentrate on the home market. That's fine because it's easier to sell whiskey in your own market. But in Norway alone, we have now more distilleries with more capacity than we sell whiskey in Norway. If you're going to survive in the long run as a whiskey producer in Norway, and probably the other countries as well, you have to start export, because we are only 5 million people in Norway, and it is limited how much whiskey we actually can drink. Yeah, and
Try to stretch that.
yeah, I'll buy an extra bottle. I'll take a bottle for the team. But the thing is, I believe for the future that age statement will be less and less important because all the big brands as well do more and more non-age statement. Was just talking about what the consumer is looking at today, and I think that you actually can talk about your product and what it is very important for the future. And if you want a younger consumer, then sustainability will also be a important thing.
We have a question here, and then on to you.
Where am I going?
Okay, so when you spoke about the sustainability, I think everybody in this room agrees that this is a very important thing, and it's something that we would all love to contribute to and with as best as we can through whatever we can do. I do, however, have some concerns in terms of especially bottle weight, because we've tried to make a lightweight bottle and it's super brittle. It breaks because everything is a manual filling process, and it gets bumped and dunked and hammered around. And I'm a bit concerned that it might lead to more breakage on the way to the monopolies or in transit, or I mean, we also have to consider export to, let's say, countries, because as you clearly point out, there's not a big enough market for even the Norwegian distilleries in Norway. So how are we all going to survive? We need to do export, and we need more than Sweden, Denmark, Finland, most likely. So there's all of these things that are kind of, I personally think, unevening the playing field, because it is a huge cost for a small distillery who's already spending all of their money on hoops and and barrels to have a custom-made bottle, and the big guys, they will custom-make a bottle, easy as that, and it doesn't cost them really anything because they can produce it in a 2 million quantity as a trial batch. So I mean, is there any way to is there any way to kind of, I wouldn't say maybe rethink, but is there anything else that we as a small producer can do that maybe isn't such a big step on the ladder as actually conforming to, was it 325 grams for a 500 milliliter bottle, which is, I mean, that's lightweight.
Some of the things I said earlier was that we know that it's almost impossible for most of you to reach this goal when it comes to bottles. I know some has been able to do it, but those have the opportunity to buy a larger quantum of bottles. I know this, but the only thing I can say about bottle weight is that I hope that the glass producers will follow suit and start to make some of their standard bottles into lighter weights. The wine industry has done this for a very long time now, and they can fill a lot of bottles in a very fast time. But it demands different kind of filling systems. It's big investment. I know all this, but we hope. I can only say hope that they see the environmental effect as well and will make this available for everybody and not only the big guys that can use a lot of money to produce a bottle. On the other things, it's I know it's hard to get organic grains. It's hard to be organic if you don't have your own produce. So to look at all the different aspects of how do you use energy, how do you fuel your system. If you are a farm distillery, can you use some of the stuff you do on the farm to implement further on in your process? And now with the prices on electricity, this is becoming much more key to not only be more environmental, have more focus on environmental issues, is maybe also a point on survival. So energy is something you can do. But the only thing I would say that it's really, really important. If you say anything about your product being good to the environment on the bottle, you have to state why. You can't just write it. The new legislation for greenwashing says you have to put on your label why you claim something. So if you say it's lightweight, you can say it's lightweight and you have to write how lightweight it is. It doesn't need to be lightweight in our system, But you can have a label that says our bottle is much lighter than the most of other bottles. It weighs only this. That you can do, but you can't get the green sticker in our stores if things are going the way it seems to. Nothing is decided from the wine monopoly yet, but we have got some strong indications from the government that we have to follow, and nothing is, I don't know yet, because that's not my field. I've just told you what I know, and I got to know about the bottle weight. I was told last week, so it's kind of new still.
It was more a general.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, you really want to say first?
If you have something about the lightweight bottles,
Yeah.
you can do it.
Okay, yeah. Now, I think you bring up a really important perspective. We talk about lightweight. There are also people who talk about right weight. And that's exactly taking those factors into account. And we, of course, are very much aware of this. I have also visited producers who export a lot. And they have, found a bottle that minimizes the secondary packaging and how they can pack into a shipping container and so on. And that glass bottle is also not reaching, as of now, the lightweight definition. So we are aware of this. The challenge that we have, though, is the number of products that we have. So we can't really have a system where we allow you to be, not 400 but 413, because that would, help you with secondary packaging and so on. I mean, that's how we have to treat everyone equal. So we are absolutely aware that this is a bit, how do you say in English, trubbigt. It's yeah.
It's a blunt instrument.
It's a blunt instrument. So that's why I said it's one thing that we are working on. It's not the only thing. But then, of course, I understand that it's a huge issue for you. But since we communicated about the maximum weight limits, we've also had some really good discussions, and both suppliers and producers contacting us. And like David said earlier, always feel free to contact us. And have these discussions, because of course we also need input on what's happening in the market. Can we tweak this instrument in a different way? And also what I just mentioned earlier is that this maximum weight applies to product that sells a volume that translates into 5 tons of CO2 emissions per year. So it's basically the number of bottles that you sell times the emission factor for glass bottles. If that equals or exceeds 5 tons, then this applies. So if you don't sell that many bottles, you can actually, for now, I should say, continue. We might change, both the weights down as well as the CO2 limit, because of course we want to reduce the climate impact. But the more possibilities we have to collect other types of data, let's say from the glass manufacturers, what is their sources of energy, how efficient is their production. We are also looking at having, like a CO2 budget per product. And that's a factor of 100, then, you can have a heavier bottle because you're really low on growing and production, for example. So, we have to take steps that we can see right now, but it's not the end, and it's not sort of the only thing that we do.
I was just worried that setting the kind of the gram weight of the bottle means that it doesn't matter if it's been shipped from Mexico or from Sweden to the warehouse in Sweden. It doesn't kind of take into account all of the CO2 emissions that are there. It's just kind of we can say 400 grams and
yeah, as of now, it is like that.
So if it would be possible to kind of extend it or add more factors into it, so that you actually take more care of the small producers in each respective country.
Absolutely, but I mean, you are right. As of now, it is that blunt, that it is on. It doesn't matter where it's produced. We would love to get all of this data, but if we just mention this to our suppliers, and probably to you as well, you will start screaming no, because if we should get then I need to get information on what glass manufacturer, what is the energy mix in that country, how efficient is that. This is happening, to be honest, because we have dialogue with a lot of major glass manufacturers, at least in Europe to start with. When it comes to transportation, then we also need to know, what is the filling grade, what kind of vehicle was it, what, mode of transport, what kind of fuel, to be able to calculate. So, and I think we also have to be very careful that, we can also not put things into place that by default favors, let's say, Swedish producers, because I mean we have to be open. And I think that it's a common question that we get, that people think that what's produced in Sweden or even in Europe would by default have a lower climate impact compared to, let's say, wine from Australia, whiskey from the US. That's also not true, because if you ship very efficiently in a container from Australia or the US, the CO2 emissions per liter will be much less than if you have a truck running on diesel from the south of Sweden to the north of Sweden, for example. So it's super complex, but of course we have to kind of take one bit at a time that we can move forward. But I think you raised a good question of, understanding the complexity, because we don't want to put in a limit here that creates more problem over here, and then you need to tell us and scream and shout if we don't listen the first time.
Can I just give one little extra thing into that, is that if there were other standards in the business regarding reusable glass or reused glass and the energy, we do have a limited scope of influence, but you as producers have more influence on your own suppliers, and we need to recognize that. So for us, that blunt tool is because we have a limited influence on your suppliers. But don't paint yourself into corners here, because glass is just one packaging type. Yet again, pouches, paper-based packages, everything's on the table.
Hi. Oh, okay.
Can I still say one word about Finnish market? When talking about responsibility issues, at the moment we are working with our climate roadmap also in Finland, and I think it's important to do things that has impact, and we are talking. Then we need to talk about the selection that we already have, the volumes there. So we need to choose what to do. For spirits in Finland, quite much of volumes are already in plastic bottles. So in that sense, it's good starting point. But it makes maybe things a little bit more difficult, because rest of the selection it's spread to. It's quite fragmented, and what might suit somebody might not suit everybody. So we need to be careful with that and think about the choices. Another thing with climate roadmap is the production, and I think Myken Distillery already mentioned about that it's not much that we talk about that yet, but in spirits, as probably everybody knows, when it comes to CO2 emissions, lots lies there, and what is done there, it's very, very important.
Okay, hi. My name is Anssi. I'm from Teerenpeli Distillery, Finland. Sorry being a little bit late. I have easy question. When will you guys have Nordic whiskey shelf in your store? Labeled up Nordic whiskey, and maybe you have talked about this, but I don't know. And then we have all the Nordic whiskies from Nordic countries in that shelf. When will this happen?
Do you want to start?
First of all, we need to have enough sales volume to do that at all. When we don't, we talked about it earlier before we arrived. We don't have the sales volume. The other thing is that we have the reason we have divided the whiskey up like we have is because of regulations. The regulations for Irish, American, and Scottish whiskey. The regulation for the rest is vague. So you can do a lot of different things, and then we can't put it in the same shelf and just. If there had been a Nordic regulation or a Norwegian regulation or so on, it would be much easier to make its own category, even with low sales numbers. But when you have low sales numbers, you have to build the category first. You can't just start a category with nothing in it. And someday. Yes, and when it comes, we can do something. But before it comes, we can't.
I think from our perspective, we used to have a segment called Other Malts, and it was a very diverse segment until all you guys came up on the scene. Because then, of course, the Swedish produced malt whiskies were of more interest for the consumers, which is, I think, totally natural. So today our Other Malt segments is almost only Swedish malts. I think we have one foreign product in that segment right now, 8 positions. It's still, we won't call it a Nordic whiskey segment. The problem with this segment, though, is that, as I pointed out earlier, the offerings are too much the same, so the cake is actually becoming smaller. What we need to see are more diverse offerings. We need to see new ideas and new... I understand that this is... we are in a current financial situation where a lot of customers are chasing cheaper offerings. They are. And this is the truth. And we also had a development during COVID where our volumes increased massively. And me and Emily, we were talking about it. These are going to come down slowly. And now I can tell you already that they're going up again. And this tells us that the Swedish crown is now so devalued towards the other currencies that the consumers, they can't afford to buy whiskey products in other sales channels. So they're coming back to us. But we also see the litre price coming down. And we see that this segment right now is in a bad state because it has too much premium priced products. Now, it would work if those premium priced products had, and I say this, attributes that were commercially viable and would make the consumer understand why I'm making this active choice. And I say sustainability is one way to go, because you can't give us or the consumers 12, 15, 18-year-old whiskey. There isn't stock. And you can't supply that in a stable manner. And you can't do it at the same price as your competitors from Scotland, who have been doing this for 150, 200 years. So why not take the high road here and try to beat them at their own game with other attributes? And sustainability is one way to go. Of course, there are other ways to go. If you come to me and say, David, I want to enter the market at a price that is much more competitive than the other suppliers are already doing, is this of interest? And I would lie if I said it wasn't. It would. There is a lot of market share to be gained by being a good offering on the market. There are other ways, of course, too, but that is one way to go, especially in today's climate.
I just want to jump in. Sorry, I know we've got a couple of questions. Speaking from someone who doesn't live in a country that has a monopoly, so forgive me. We seem to be stuck in this kind of weird loop here, this kind of weird kind of feedback loop or catch-22 situation where you're saying you want diversity and your offering needs to demonstrate the diversity, and the consumers want diversity. But as soon as the diverse whiskies appear, the system says no, because they're too diverse and they don't fit the definition that you have created. So you want diversity, but at the same time you're rejecting diversity. Or maybe I've got that wrong.
I would say that the consumer palate, if we're talking flavor profiles, then it is a bit discriminatory, the Swedish palate. They want extra. They want extra everything for their buck. So, but our job is maintaining a diverse assortment, and a diverse assortment is not just flavor profiles; it's other attributes. It's price, it's ABVs, which is a part of the flavor profile, really, and cask finishes. It can be origins. It can be so many things, and we need to maintain that assortment as diverse as we do. We have a lot of segments as Systembolaget, so we've divided. We can maintain a lot of these different whiskey sources, whether it be Canada or whether it be Ireland or or the US. I mean, in our largest stores, I think we have 60 positions for Scotch single malt whiskey. And we need to have that because we have such a high demand on whiskey in Sweden. So we do have a very diverse assortment, but we need to maintain it. And one of the things that we do see over time is people premiumize too quickly. They go up before they've taken enough market share to maintain in the market.
Hello, my name is Trude from Myken. A huge part of sustainability is, of course, energy production in the distillery. And since we are now quadrupling our production, we are working intensely with this. I didn't know that you could express it on the label if your production is more sustainable than other. Or you have to sort of state why. But then my question is, what is the base? Because all of us, we live in countries where the electricity mix is quite clean. So we are sort of used to thinking about our electricity as quite clean. But if you compare it worldwide, it's not. As clean as in the Nordic countries. So how can we express this on the label, both for the Norwegian market, because we are competing with foreign whiskey, but also when we are sort of going out internationally, because we are now on the brink of going out on the export market. And we really do care about sustainability, and we would like to also present us with, for us it is something that we have grown up with, but it is actually et fortrinn. I don't know what that is in English, but I guess you all understand it. Advantage, yes.
Do you want to start, or should I? Yeah, I mean, in terms of energy and production, I think it's also important to first remember that the best and the cleanest energy is the one you don't consume. So efficiency is, of course, step one. And then, like you rightly say, I mean, sort of the general energy mix in the Nordics is based on quite a lot of renewable sources. So that's, of course, positive. Then when it comes to stating this, I mean, we look a lot, of course, what's happening in the EU legislation, and it was good to hear from Norway that even if you're not member of the EU, there's a similar view to that. I mean, it's referred to in EU as green claims, and all sustainability statements needs to be backed up, and third-party certification is a first step. But we're also learning and seeing some cases where even a third-party certification is not enough. So that's what you need to look at. And I mean, it's a bit complex, to be honest. So I mean, we are also using law firms and so on to try to help us to exactly understand what this is about. So and similarly so for this customer guidance that we have in our stores. I mean, we have to be equally careful with that and not claim things that are not true or that are not based on third parties. So I mean, the third party certifications again is what comes back, but also to keep in mind that might also not be enough to put on your product. It has to be further sort of supported. So it's a complex field. I think it's the right way to go for the EU because, I mean, we see so many statements in terms of climate neutral and fossil free, and how are you supposed to know? I mean, I think I kind of know a lot about this. I also get confused when I go just regular shopping to be able to understand. So I think it's needed, but we are at a moment right now in time where it's probably wise to go a little bit careful and see exactly where this is going. But third-party certification for all of your sustainability statement is at least the first step to take.
I mean, if there were a standard, it would simplify the purchasing process too. If there was an industry-wide standard, which you could measure against, I'm pretty sure we would use it in all our tenders. So, just saying.
Right. Håkan Jarskog from Agitator. You've talked about countries of origin. I'd like to ask you about categories instead. A few years ago, it was quite simple. The Scotch ruled. The Scotch Whisky Act said there's malt whisky, there's grain whisky, and there's blended whisky. And that applied all over the world. With the emergence of world whisky, these categories are no longer really that relevant anymore. I think there's quite a lot of us in here who are pushing these limits. And you can't always say, okay, is this a malt whisky? Is this a grain whisky? Is this a blended whisky? Well, it's something in between, or all of it. How do you see this development in your stores and in your tenders right now and in the future?
We do have, at Systembolaget, we do have different segments. We have one called Other Malt Whiskies, and then we have one called Other Whiskies. So we do accommodate the fact that there are not just malt whiskies outside of Scotland. There are other whiskies made of other raw materials. If the consumer is ready for that, that is more, it's a wait and see game, but we won't stop looking for whiskies to diversify our assortment. So, and I must say that the last few years, some of the products that have been made in the Nordic area, made of other materials than malt, other raw materials than malt, other grains, have been very, very good, of very high quality. And I think it would suit the consumer in Sweden if they came into contact with that as a good choice, or a good substitute, if you're not a substitute, a permanent other choice if they will too. So there are loads of possibilities, and we won't shut those doors. I think if the Scotch legislation for whisky is obsolete or not, that only time will tell. I mean, I myself became a Swedish citizen only 5 years ago because of Brexit. So I have some very strong views on this, but there's a void. There is a legal and definition void since Britain has left the EU, and it's a void that is going to be. I mean, we miss having their presence as close, but it also means opportunities, and this room is full of producers who can take that opportunity, I would say. I mean, we were in Normandy in France this fall, and as you pointed out, there was loads of, I mean, every producer of Calvados was now distilling whiskey. And some of it was really, really good. Might not reach Sweden because there's such small volumes, but I mean, there's literally whiskey being made everywhere in Europe. So.
There was one before you.
When you look at categories, how our system is divided up, we just made the new single malt category for single malt for the rest of the world, and the reason why we are upholding that category and the whiskey, Scotch single malt whiskey, is to protect the whiskey category, because this, as the sales are for Scotch whiskey, it's impossible for all other whiskies to survive in our market unless we make other categories for other whiskies. So that's why we're still keeping the US, the Irish and the whiskey categories, because those are huge sales compared to everything else. And as I said earlier, today we don't have many products in that category, and that has to do with low sales in our market. But we hope to get these categories bigger when sales are increasing. And the other thing is that we look mostly at the EU for what kind of legislations are there, which kind of rules for whiskies are there, and they are quite vague. That means that this category will still be vague and have an opportunity, except from the single malt, to make a lot of different whiskies and put into these categories. So at the moment we won't change anything or diversify any more in the categories until we see volumes. But still, these categories you are freely to put in, which in whiskey others you can put whatever you like except from single malts. Then it has to go into the single malt category. So it's very hard to make new categories when you don't have any really foothold on what to put it in. And we try to put it into a system. It's better to keep that system open than to try to put it into categories when we don't have that much product yet and everybody's doing different things. Is that the answer to your question?
I think the question was open.
Yeah.
Because it's a problem all over the world. Every store, we are doing so many different things, and they can't be squeezed into the Scotch Whisky Act.
I think that there would be room for a real workshop to try to develop something new for the future. And of course it's possible to change segmentation of whiskies. It's something that it's possible to do, but if there is no really volumes, it's a difficult task in that sense. And unfortunately, current economic situation has led to a situation that consumers are having a little bit more conservative choices at the moment, and we need to see how all this is developing in Finnish markets. But as said, I believe there is quite much room to develop whiskey category.
Just a comment about whiskies. What we see in the market now, according to economy and everything we're talking about, is that blended whiskies are increasing because they are cheap. The lowest price segment of single malts are losing. The higher level of single malts are increasing. So expensive whiskies are selling more. Cheap single malt whiskies are selling less, and really cheap whiskies are selling even more. So I think that the people that had a limit and want to buy the cheapest single malt are the ones now that are at the moment are losing and are changing category for what they're buying. We don't see any sign that more expensive whiskies and premium whiskies, and where most of you are in the category, are changing. And Norwegian whiskies in Norway are selling really well at the moment, the few we have. So we just hope that we will increase more volume so we can sell more whiskey in Norway. But still, it's nothing that says that we are selling less expensive whiskey in Norway.
Right, we've time for two very quick questions.
Yeah, so I'm Mikko Heinilä from Kyrö Distillery. As per today's discussion, I can kind of see that there has been this big game going on where the Scottish malt has been always the leader. But now it seems like you guys are going to change the game. The new goalpost is going to be established for the environmental part. And we guys have been on the bench for now. But the thing is that nobody has set the rules. There is no certifications available. There is no Nordic whiskey yet. So actually this room can make the difference. This room can make the kind of determine what is Nordic whiskey. And we can decide, we can make certificates on the environmental aspect. And how can we kind of, yeah, exactly. And how to prove them. And if we can do this, we can set the example to the rest of the whiskey world. But we are already ahead of that. If we do the terms, the rules, how do we measure it, and how do we adopt it? Because that is what we can then propose to monopoles, where we have the big volumes. And as per that, I would assume that the rest of the whiskey world has to follow. And we are then like many years already ahead of the game.
Good, right. Well, that's tomorrow's. No, quite honestly, that is one of the reasons that we decided to have this, because of that very need of everybody getting together to work out what this category is about and how everybody can help each other to raise the image of Nordic whisky and actually get it into monopolies and get everybody around the world understanding what's going on. So thank you for saying that. Don, finally. Don Davies, who essentially is trying to establish her own monopoly.
Well, I do have as many SKUs as Finland, so I think I'm almost there. I have like 1,000 questions, but since Davis told me I'm only going to have one, can I do one quick one and a half one? One very quick one. Actually, I was just wondering how important B Corp is for your customers, because that's a growing certification in the UK, and we're seeing a lot of interest in it. And the other question actually was around future trends. So as someone that's sort of very much working at the future trends and moving quite quickly on them, because of the system you work in, how easy is it to be reactive to trends and to go after future trends, which for me is very, very much world whisky?
B Corp, yeah. We get a lot of questions on B Corp. So since there are, like I said, in wine, there's a lot of certifications. So what we started in 2019 at Systembolaget, actually together with the other Nordic monopolies, was to do a benchmark study. Because you have all of these certifications, and we didn't know, how can we compare them? How do we know that? What issues do they cover? How deep do they go? How much of growers are included, and so on. So since 2019, we have done this annual benchmark study, where we continuously add more certifications that we come across that is requested by producers and by suppliers. So for this latest round, B Corp was added because obviously there was a big interest from a lot of the importers to include B Corp. So how we see B Corp is that it's an organizational certification. And what that means is that, first of all, it actually covers a lot of the environmental, climate, and actually human rights and social aspects. But it does it on an organizational level. So that's great, because that will help your company to take steps forward, to systematically work with sustainability, to do, your own due diligence processes, risk analysis, analysis of your environmental and climate impact, and so on. But for the customer guidance that we showed you in one of the slides earlier, there we are looking for certifications that are on a product level. So where there is a chain of custody, so for fair trade or Bon Sucro or organic, where there's a clear regulations showing the chain of custody, so that the raw material is traced through the supply chain. And B Corp does not have that yet. I actually have a meeting scheduled with B Corp, I think it's this week or next week. So this is one of the topics that we will, of course, bring up with them. But sort of topic-wise, they do cover a lot of good things, but it's organizational level, and we need it on a product level. And the other question, I guess someone else needs to answer.
No, but I think it's a good thing if you, as producers, give that feedback to the people at B Corp, that we need it to work down on a product level. What do we?
And actually also that it needs to be a bit stronger in terms of third party, because it starts off as a self-assessment. So there's a lot of things that could be strengthened there. No, yeah.
And regarding the trends, I believe that this is a unique market. Sweden is one of the. We have 300 plus whiskey clubs. We have spread all over the country, not just in Stockholm or just in Gothenburg or just in Malmö. They're just spread all over the country. We have a huge amount of collectors. We have loads of people, forums, and Sweden is unique. And I've been to almost 100 distilleries in Scotland. And I get opportunities to see things that others do not see. I go through their visiting books sometimes just for fun, because there are a lot of Swedish names, and I know how to pronounce them. Yes, this is a market where even the largest of producers have tested products that we have sat and discussed, and they've asked, do you think this is a good idea? And I said, yeah, let's try it. So I would say that Sweden is sometimes ahead of the curve with trends when it comes to whiskey. That might not, for every single trend, but if we look at the large movement of whiskey, then I think Sweden is way ahead. It's very difficult for me to go anywhere on any exhibition and talk to any suppliers that are there. Some of them have been named here today, large distributors. They won't have anything of interest, because what's of interest they will show me here in Sweden, because this market is so important to them to develop new products and to see if they're commercially viable. And I'm so spoiled. So you would not believe it. And so is the Swedish consumer, and good for them. I hope it continues.
Trends in Norway. When it comes to wine and beer, we are right on the point. We see all the international trends and sometimes are even ahead. When it comes to spirit, the story is completely different, and it's kind of sad. The problem in Norway is that spirit trends take many years to come, and sometimes when we believe that the trend will come to Norway next year, we write tenders and it fails completely and takes another 4 years until we have this in Norway. We have many examples of this. The gin trend started 9 years ago in Spain. It just started 2 years ago in Norway, 3 years ago. They're talking about the gin trend in Norway, but when you look at the sales, it's not really a trend. It's just talking about the big gin trend in Norway. So the reason for this, I firmly believe that this is because of the taxing system in Norway, and things are they are so expensive. People go into bars and try things, and then they go back to the wine monopoly and buy it. When we have banned on commercials for all the other things, people pick them up and buy them to try it. But to buy something that costs 800 euros or 1,000 euros or 80 euros or 100 euros, not the other way around. Sorry about my math. People don't experiment in the same way, and this stops some of the trends. So we are 100%. We need the on-trade to do anything else at all. During the pandemic, we didn't see one new trend when it comes spirits-wise in Norway because all of on-trade was locked down. So trends for spirits are very slow to start in Norway. When they catch on, they last even longer in Norway than other places because people don't get new input. Sorry about that, but it's quite, yeah, that's the way it is. So if the Nordic whiskies will peak in Norway, we'll be there for a long time. But this is the last thing is a bit of a joke, but almost true. We are slow on spirit trends in Norway, and that I think that has to do with the pricing. When alcohol tax for a normal bottle of whiskey is 350 NOK, about 35 euros, that is a lot on top of the normal price. So that's the way it is with spirits in Norway.
And finally.
Yeah. When I listen to Systembolaget and Vinmonopolet, it's obvious that there are a little bit different trends in different markets, and when they come to different markets, there can be some variation in time. Of course, we need to listen to Finnish consumer and what they are wishing for, and that will guide us forward with trends. But of course, also what suppliers and producers are doing has very much impact. We have plant selection, but also order selection is open for suppliers and producers. For example, gin has been trending for a while in Finland, and I think Finnish producers have had a lot of impact on that also. So that's good.
Well, thank you so much. Great session. We learned a huge amount. I'm sure there were many more questions, but I'm afraid my job is essentially looking at clocks. That's all I do. We do have a distillery to visit, but before we do, please, a huge round of applause for Would you like to explain what's happening now?
I'm not really sure. I know there's a distillery tour, and you are supposed to be separated into 3 groups, but here comes the people who knows. Second by the bell.
So a lot of people coming through the door. So we're going to do the tour of the distillery and of the malting facility, and also one of our warehouses here in Gävle. We decided to do 3 groups, and we'll each have a distillery operator with us, who knows best. So we'll have a Finnish-speaking group, first of all. Maybe you can just leave the room. You will go with.
How do you go, Finns? Mikko gone. Where is he? We've lost one Finn already.
We've lost one and must be in the name. Are we taking a while belongings as well?
Yes.
Okay, so quite a few people left, yeah. English-speaking persons in the room.
It's just embarrassing, isn't it?
But we have to add some Swedish people to that group. But you will go with any time. Yeah, you can leave stuff here, absolutely. But we want to take a walk like 200 meters outside, so you can go grab a jacket.
Are you here tonight or leaving now?
We're leaving now, actually, so we'll
I just want to be I know you're not handing out the labels and anything like that, but I did talk to recently, just 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and that we didn't bring on the success team.
But you have to have someone to represent us.
Yeah, sure. I've been talking to a few clients and some others, right? So, but I mean, because I want to have a stable product for you, right? So, yeah, but something we will. Exactly. I'll yeah, maybe I'll send it back. We're looking for tenders as well. Of course. Yeah, but I was just curious about the because if I look at Swedish whiskey is a really big thing. But Danish whiskey is good. Of course, it makes sense. Like you said, of course it's interesting. But how do you move that into Nordic specific especially? I think it's really good.
vi vill kanske inte en människa i någon större utmärkelse i alla fall. Så far illa, varken socialt eller så våra men det är svårt just som att vi är om jag får uttrycka det bäst. Fattar du? Det är en utmaning så här. Men det är den här styrkeforskarutbildningen som är så viktig. Ja, precis. Man själv söker som varför man är